Since the day President Donald Trump has taken his presidential seat, it has been a riot all across the globe and now his nation itself. When we talk about US, the recent past few weeks have seen not just the feud between Elon Musk and the president himself, where a lot of allegations and Twitter was involved, which has been put to rest now. Now we are finding a great deal of unrest in the state of California. Now, state of California is the seat of Democrats, and the governor of California, Newsom, is the one of the major faces who was standing against the Republican Party President Donald Trump. So basically, this can be seen as a preview what can be done by the Republican Party President Donald Trump against the Democrats, what is happening in California, especially the nation's second largest city, that is Los Angeles. Now, what we are seeing has been happening over past few weeks, and it becomes very important for us to understand the timeline of it and how exactly it began. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi. My name is Shubhangi Singh, and we will be trying to understand the issue of LA protest in very great detail. So when we talk about the protest, it basically started when the US Immigration and Custom Enforcement Department started conducting raids in the urban areas of California. So when I'm talking about urban areas of California, I am referring to Los Angeles, I am referring to San Francisco, I am referring to Oakland. Now, this particular department is responsible. It is a federal law enforcement agency under the US Department of Homeland Security. And it is their stated mission to protect United States from transnational crime and illegal immigration. Now, with Donald Trump's idea of ousting and deporting all these illegal immigrants, a state where it is a Democrat's seat seemed like a good place to start. Now, California, which is considered a progressive state because it has been welcoming to migrants, it has been furthermore in terms of the Senate bill where it facilitates, it has been considered progressive in all these terms. Now, what is the problem? Once ICE made the breakdown on these illegal immigrants, there were large-scale protests which were started on 6th of June. Now, once these protests began, gradually they turned violent and it resulted in road blockades, violent upbringings, clashes, and the clashes with law enforcement parties, which later resulted on 7th June, where President Donald Trump deployed National Guards to ensure that the lawlessness as well as the violent mobs are put under control. Now, the problem here when we are talking about the deployment of National Guard is that we have to remember that US is a federation of state, and when we are talking about federation of state, we have separate powers when it comes to the state's autonomy is present, and then we have powers for the federal government as well. Now, when we are talking about National Guard happens to be a unit which is under US federal government, but it serves both the units of the power, that is state as well as federal government. At the state level, it serves only when it is called by the governor, and it is also known as state's active duty. But when president calls the National Guard, it is also known as the federalization of National Guards. It is usually for the overseas missions. So it is very unusual to see that the National Guards are going into a state where the governor, important thing to remember is that the governor has not given consent. And which is why here we can see that Mayor Karen Bass has implemented recently, in last 2 days, that a curfew has been implemented, and there are protests against by the mayors all across the state of California against these raids and by the authoritarian behavior of the Trump federal government by sending the NG guards to a state. Now, when we talk about National Guards which have been sent to a state, such incident was last seen in 1965. So this unusual tactic that has been taken up by Donald Trump has not been very well received, and it is further fueling protest across various cities in US. And it has been dealt with a very firm hand, where we started, as you can see, it has been dealt with a very firm hand that Donald Trump clearly says he's not scared to go further. And one very good example was given on 9th of June, where he deployed 700 Marines, which is a unit of not just Navy but also armed forces. Marines are supposed to serve the federal government, but they have been deployed and they are waiting for action. However, that has also not been consented by the governor. And apart from that, additional 2,000 National Guards have been deployed in the city of Los Angeles. Now, all of this has rackled the debate where state is standing up against the federal government. And now LAPD, that is Los Angeles Police Department, is at present enforcing downtown curfew so as to ensure that the peacefulness of the city is maintained. But to ensure that mass arrests are taking place and continuation of the crackdown by ICE authorities on the illegal immigrants continue, which is again fueling the idea of protest. And these protests are turning gradually into riots. And as I mentioned, Marines have been already deployed within 2 days. It was on 9th June later that Marines were deployed to ensure that the lawlessness, as quoted by Donald Trump, is taken in. Now, we have to understand what is exactly the issue herein, where the state and the federal government has come against each other. What are the reasons that we have to take in consideration, that we have to understand that they are standing in front of each other? First, it is more of a political chaos, because when we talk about the state government of California, as I have mentioned, it is the seat of the Democrats. When I'm talking about President Donald Trump, he belongs to and he's the one of the biggest face as of now of the Republican Party. Now, in this political chaos, there has been a lot of blaming here and there, where the Californian governor, Gavin Newsom, has clearly called that this is a blatant abuse of power. He has mentioned this is assault of democracy. And Donald Trump has been very clear that he is not scared to take further actions, be taking a stronger hand in controlling the situation. Other than that, Department of Homeland Security has also given the statement that LAPD or the LA officials have been insufficient in controlling the chaos that is taking place. The mayor of LA has gone ahead and asked that we need to control this, and she is talking about that this is an international effort to sow the seeds of hatred. Now, apart from the political chaos, we also need to understand that this debate comes not just from the political chaos, it also comes from the fact that, as I mentioned, that NG is controlled by two powers. NG can be deployed in two senses. The first sense I mentioned, it has state control. The governor commands NG for the state level mission. Then I mentioned the federal control, that the president or the federal government can federalize national government for national missions, which is usually seen for overseas operation. Now, this is the part where the conflict came in. That NG was deployed, that is National Guards, was deployed without the permission or consent of the governor. Now, California in itself has a lot of laws and acts which make sure that they can restrict the state cooperation at their own level. And if we are talking about this, that this means that federal government, so when I'm talking about federal government, they will need the state and local governments to help with deportation. So when I'm speaking about California, I'm especially referring to the Senate Bill 54 of California Values Act. When we are talking about California Values Act, it is one of the biggest act to ensure state autonomy, especially on the topic that we are having the discussion. It is the strongest statewide sanctuary law. It protects the safety as well as well-being of all Californians. So everybody who is residing in California, they will be protected, and there will be curtailed use of state and local resources. That means that state and local resources cannot be used for mass deportation, and it ensures that everybody who's living in California, who's a resident, who's a Californian, can access to important institutions such as schools, health facilities, courthouses, and that accessibility remains to everybody. So this is one law which facilitates, and it will facilitate the restriction of state cooperation. And the governor has been very clear that they will be taking a legal action which has already gone to the federal court. They have already talked about that we are clearly denouncing the act of deploying National Guards as well as Marines. And they have also said that this is against the PC Act. So now we will be talking about PC Act. PC is basically Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. It clearly prohibits the use of US military for domestic law enforcement. So here the federal government stands in direct conflict of this act. The deployment of military can be only done for law enforcement in two cases: if it is being done under Insurrection Act, or if there is a declared national emergency, which is not the case as of now. Another act that we talked about is, or definitely, the California Values Act, SB 54, which definitely indicates the state's autonomy that they have through this particular act. Other than that, California has states' right as well. Being a federation of state, the state has its own sovereignty, and forcing military action basically stands in the violation of 10th Amendment. So this becomes very important for us to understand what are the laws which are standing in favor of the Californian government, Californian state government, and what are the laws which can facilitate federal government for this particular action they have been taken. So if we are talking about federal government side, it will be Insurrection Act and it will be declared national emergency. Now, all of this that has been going on, the constant rumble that has been seen across Los Angeles and many other cities like Texas now, it will have broader implications. Not just these protests that have turned violent, but also the broader implications that the US federalism will see in coming times. When we are talking about broader implications, it becomes important for us to see all the dimensions. Because when we are talking about US federalism, we have to understand that it is setting a very dangerous precedent. That means it is talking about that federal government has the power to override the state authority. Apart from that, it clearly brings on the use of military not just for law enforcement. Please remember, the first reason we talk about was political suppression. So it will facilitate use of military for political suppression for achieving political agendas. Then if we talk about democracy, the broader implications that we'll see on democracy would be definitely the first one being the erosion of civil liberties, where we are talking that the basic rights such as the rights to protest peacefully were taken away, where they gradually turned into a violent riot. It is curbing their right to dissent, to say that they have a different opinion. And it is directly talking about the ways, the actions that have been taken by the US federal government, that it is becoming a authoritarian government. And this has been already highlighted by the governor as well as mayor, the governor of California as well as the mayor of Los Angeles. Other than that, if we talk about the broader implications for immigration policy, we have to understand that it will further fuel a divide between political and as well cultural views in terms of state immigration policy and federal immigration policy. It will also fuel secessionist debates. When I'm talking about secessionist debates, what do I mean by that? So basically, when we are talking about US Federation, here states have the right to secede from the Federation. That means these states have come together to form a federation. That means they have individual. It is not like India where it is union of states and the states do not hold any right to secede from the union. So it might also fuel such secessionist debate. My ask from you is to understand is that you need to let me know in the comment section that what is the right side? Is the state government right? The Californian government right? Are the LA protests right? Or is it the federal government which have taken a very strong, firm hand on these protests? Which is the right side? And what would be the way to go from here on? That was all from my side. Thank you so much for joining in.